Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again, and today I wanted to do something special related to my education pursuit and my booktube interest. I want to talk about Malazan and the Academy. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, I want to look at scholarly works written in response to Malazan. I'm going to take you through a rough timeline of some of these examples, but be warned, there's actually not that much out there. So much more has been written about other famous fantasy and sci-fi series and authors. Also, and unfortunately, you'll notice a significant lack of attention given to Esselman's contributions. While I can't promise this is everything that's been written in this more academic style, I am pretty confident in saying that this is most of it. Now, who am I making this video for exactly? I'm guessing this will appeal to two types of Malazan fans. One, maybe you're a fan and you want to try to write something more academic, and you maybe want to try to get an essay or an article about Malazan published at some point. Well, I think it's really important that you look into a lot of, if not all, of the sources that I'm going to go through today. Second type of fan, maybe you don't have an interest in writing anything particularly academic, totally cool, understandable, but maybe you're still interested in what the academics have to say about one of your favorite series. Maybe they could clarify certain thematic points of confusion, things like that. Then I definitely say check out some of these sources. Also, why am I doing this exercise right now? Well, both Erikson and Esselman's novels will be incredibly important sources for my eventual dissertation. Therefore, I need to know what the current academic conversation is like around these books. What themes get brought up more often than others, what specific books have received the most attention, what other theories and disciplines are being folded into these scholars' various analyses of Malazan. So an annotated bibliography is a great place to start, and that's basically what this is. The rough beginnings of an annotated bibliography for all those secondary sources discussing Malazan that I've found and started to read through. Some of these I read years ago, some I've discovered only in the last few months, and I'm at different points in a lot of them, maybe with some not having read through them all the way, maybe having read a couple of the others a couple times recently. So yeah, different levels of familiarity with all these different sources. And then the structure of the video, I'm breaking this into three parts. Part 1 will be the secondary sources. Part 2 will be essays written by Erikson himself. And then Part 3 will be honorable mentions and other influential works that had an impact on both Erikson and Esselman. So here we go. Part 1, secondary sources in timeline order. So first we have this dissertation. I also should say a lot of times with this level of writing, this level of scholarship, a ton of dissertation or master's thesis kind of sources isn't necessarily the best thing. You typically want to find more things that have been published in formal journals, places like that, or books that have had like a university press like publisher. But with something like Malazan, where there really hasn't been that much written about it, sometimes you do just have to go with what's out there, and a lot of what's out there are a handful of dissertation or master's thesis type of papers. Some of them are book length, but yeah, so you will notice probably more dissertations and that sort of thing on this list than you would on other bibliographies that might be related to more widely discussed fantasy series. Like, let's say, if we were doing Tolkien or something, we wouldn't really be roping in or bringing in a bunch of dissertations. For Malazan, we kind of have to work with what we have, with what's out there. And some of these are wonderful. Like, there's no, I'm not saying that there's any difference in quality or anything like that between what's a dissertation or a thesis and what's a formally published article or book, but it's just the way that like the academic space views these sorts of things as, I guess, slightly less serious. But yeah, that doesn't really apply here, again, because we have so few sources to work with. So first, we have this dissertation that Magnus Vik wrote at the University of Bergen, Norway, for their Department of Foreign Languages. And this was in 2009. Vik's dissertation is titled "The Familiar and the Fantastic: A Study of Contemporary High Fantasy in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire and Stephen Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen." Again, that's 2009. So the author here explains, given that this was 2009, that he's only writing this after the publication of Toll the Hounds, Book 8 and Book of the Fallen, also only after the publication of Book 4 and Song of Ice and Fire, Feast for Crows. So the series are not finished at that point. Obviously, one of those series still is not finished. But mostly, Vik's thesis is concerned with defining the epic fantasy or high fantasy genre and subgenre. But he's looking at both Martin's Song of Ice and Fire and Erikson's Book of the Fallen to show that these definitions aren't stable, and these popular series are responsible for some of that instability, but not with like the pejorative sense that instability often comes with, that these series such as these are constantly the reason why the definition of the genre is in flux. And Vik seems to suggest we should celebrate this, and that this is a really great thing, that something like Malazan can change what it means for a fantasy book to be a fantasy book. Okay, so then we have another dissertation by Dr. Aidan Paul Canavan. And this is titled "Looting the Dungeon: The Quest for the Genre Fantasy Megatext." This was a dissertation submitted for a PhD at University of Liverpool in 2011, 2 years after Vik's. And A.P. Canavan's dissertation references Erikson and Esselmont throughout in his exploration of the role that tabletop role-playing games have had in shaping a lot of specific fantasy worlds and series and tropes, but also in how those games have a major impact on the public's concept of epic fantasy. It's a great read and one of the few examples I've been able to find of a more professional piece discussing the RPG and world building aspects of Malazan. And I'm super honored to have been able to have conversations with Dr. Canavan in person to discuss Malazan and all sorts of other things related to fantasy. Next, also in 2011, we have another dissertation, a third one, by, and apologies if I mess up this pronunciation, Joha-Mari Kuck. It's Kuck, and the title is "Until the Crows Came to Collect Their Souls: Revisioning the Fantasy Hero in Selected Fiction" by Stephen Erikson. This dissertation was prepared for the PhD awarded by University of South Africa, Department of English in 2011. And this one is all about the idea of the hero and heroics in epic fantasy, and what Erikson does specifically with the character Coltane in Deadhouse Gates to challenge our assumptions about what that hero would be like, should be like, and or the context that such a hero would find themselves in. And then how we have the story of those heroics told to us by a character like Dweeker. It's really interesting stuff, especially if you're a big fan of Deadhouse Gates or Coltane in particular. This was one of the earlier academic responses to the series. Moving on now, we jump ahead from 2011 to 2015 with one of my favorite pieces. This is an article by Peter Melville titled "Witnessing the Unwitnessed" in Stephen Erikson's The Malazan Book of the Fallen. This was published in Journal of the Fantastic and the Arts, Volume 26. Again, this is in 2015. So this formal essay is one of my favorites. It's all about witnessing and what witnessing actually means in this series, with references to later books in the series, which I particularly enjoyed, like Reaper's Gale and Toll the Hounds. I really enjoyed this, especially because some of the other sources don't go into as many specifics, especially with the later books. The author here, Peter Melville, he's a professor of English at the University of Winnipeg. I highly recommend this article. In particular, I like what he has to say about Samar's role as witness to Karsa's adventures and Dweeker's role as witness to the Chain of Dogs. Also in here, Melville points out the lack of formal scholarship on the books in this world, and this was a problem in 2015, 10 years ago. In this situation, it's still a bit of a problem if I haven't made that clear. So next, we're going to jump ahead 5 years. We're going to skip over one sort of thing that was published in 2018. We'll come back to that. I'll explain why. We're going to jump ahead. Did I say 5 years? We're going ahead 4 years to 2019. Another dissertation, this one by Daniel Creed. And this was a dissertation for the PhD awarded at Florida Atlantic University, awarded by the Department of English and Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Arts and Letters. And the title of Dr. Creed's dissertation is In Better Worlds Than These, Memory and Diegesis in Fantasy Literature. I feel super honored to also have met Dr. Creed, like I've been able to meet Dr. Canavan. This is his dissertation from 6 years ago. He's looking at memory, and specifically episodic memory in different works of fantasy, such as The Circus of Dr. Lau by Charles Finney, Emperor's Soul, the novella by Brandon Sanderson, and of course Malazan by Erikson. Creed's dissertation combines narrative and cognitive theory, and honestly, in many places, it goes way over my head. I also haven't read this one in a while, so I'll actually quote from the abstract just to make sure that I'm as close to the point or the argument here as possible. In this dissertation, Creed argues, quote, one value of fantasy literature, the memory of experiencing worlds not limited by empirical perception, end quote. Yeah, a great interdisciplinary analysis of Malazan. And then, so now we move on to that weird thing that I mentioned, why I didn't talk about something published before Creed's dissertation. In 2018, Dr. Matthew Oliver wrote an article for a Journal of the Fantastic and the Arts. You'll see that journal come up a lot. This is a pretty common place for scholarship written about Malazan to show up. In 2018, Dr. Oliver wrote this essay called The Riotous Conflagration of Beauteous Language, Flowery Style, Defamiliarization, and Empathic Imagination in Epic Fantasy. This short article, this essay, was eventually turned into a much larger book, or this was part of the book project that Dr. Oliver was working on at the time when he presented and wrote this in 2018. The book that this would become was published in 2022, so that's why I'm placing this here after Creed's dissertation. And this book is right here. It's called Magic Words, Magic Worlds, Form and Style in Epic Fantasy. Again, this is a third author on here that I've had the privilege to meet and speak with on a number of occasions. It works out well that I'm currently reading Stephen R. Donaldson's Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, because Dr. Oliver's essay and book here, he discusses both Malazan and Thomas Covenant. In short, Oliver basically, he's making the case for more flowery language in epic fantasy, but he also has a lot of interesting stuff to say about how ironic it is that epic fantasy is often thought of as a male-dominated power fantasy genre, yet epic fantasy is also often criticized for being too flowery or descriptive, or these more feminine attributes. So he picks apart those competing gendered assumptions about writing style and the genre. Great stuff. He also writes about a plethora of other fantasy series in this full book. He gets a little more room to expand on those things and explore them here. For Malazan, though, it's nice to see such a focus on Toll the Hounds, a lot about Toll the Hounds in here, and even some consideration of the first Carcanis book, Forge of Darkness. Another cool thing about this book is kind of the hyper-focus on language and style, if you're really interested in those aspects of Malazan. Oliver is also interested in how these different authors, different fantasy authors, use language, whether it's flowery, dense, or whatever. They all use language in a specific way to help build this sort of shared community or world for the fans of something like Malazan to all share in. And it's not just the world of the story, not just the continents that our characters are moving around in, but this new way of thinking that any of us Malazan fans have, that in and of itself is its own sort of new world that these authors have created just through their style, just through how they write, how they put the words on the page. Really, really interesting stuff. Not a terribly arduous read either. Yeah. Okay. Next up, our last thesis type thing, and this is a thesis by Jacob Domosh. This is called The Reintegration of Women and Class Conflict into Epic/Grimdark Fantasy. This was written for the master's program at Florida Atlantic University. Master's was awarded to Domosh by the Department of English, Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Arts and Letters, and this was also in 2022, same year that Oliver's book was published. Domosh is another scholar I've had the great privilege of meeting and speaking with. His thesis is all about specifically Gardens of the Moon and what Erikson is doing with gender, or rather what he does to subvert real-world gender norms in his fantasy setting, to write women characters as more human than object. Wonderful stuff. This is the kind of research and writing, though, that makes me then want to put different books from the series in conversation with each other, and in conversation with the theory and argument that Domosh puts forth in his thesis. For instance, Domosh writes about the absence of sexual violence in gardens, but I'd love to continue that conversation to explore those places later on in the series where such violence occurs. Take Domosh's argument from this thesis and apply it to books like Dead House Gates or Midnight Tides, or especially Dust of Dreams, and see what interesting sort of critical conversation comes out of that. But yeah, so then moving on from 2022, we jump way up to 2025, our present year, with Michael Woods' Fall and Ascent, Individuation in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. The foreword here is by Stephen Erikson, sorry. I've barely made any further progress in this book. While it doesn't have a formal university press publisher or anything like that, I like what I've read so far, and it does seem to be a well thought out exploration of the character arcs across Erikson's Book of the Fallen series. So if you want a really broad kind of if you're really fascinated by the variety of characters in this series, this book is probably your best bet for finding something with a more academic tone written about certain characters that you really know and love. And Erikson's foreword is also quite lovely. Now, part 2, we're going to talk about some essays by Stephen Erikson. So, Erikson wrote this essay, Stand Fast. This is published in Journal of the Fantastic and the Arts, yet again, in 2018. This was a speech turned into an essay. If you haven't read this, please try to access a copy. It's a pretty short piece, but I think it's a wonderful example of the way Erikson writes about himself when he has to. He presented this when he was the guest of honor at, when he was the guest of honor at the International Conference for the Fantastic and the Arts about 7 years ago. A lot about his family in here, but there's also just more generally about communities of people persisting and surviving, standing fast through difficult times. He also talks just a little bit about his books. Next up, kind of a strange collection to discuss, but Erikson, he's written several essays and just published them to his Facebook page. If you don't follow him on Facebook, I highly recommend you do so if you're interested in any of these essays. But thank you to the wonderful Malazan Reddit community. Someone there was able to direct me to this wonderful Redditor username SleepinXonXbed, who has compiled a Google Drive collection of all of these different essays, thought experiments, things that Erikson has written and posted to his Facebook page. A few notable ones: Problem of Karsa Orlong. That's a great one. On authorial intent is really wonderful. One of my favorites is this essay called The Author as the Living Dead, Barth's Death of the Author, Zombie Horror, and Literary Criticism. I believe it's in this essay in particular where he makes an analogy that I might not remember it exactly how it went, but I still kind of think about it to this day. It's something about how like an author witnessing academics talking about their works is kind of like being in the room where those academics are all playing a game of poker. And the author can walk around outside to see everyone's cards, how they're playing their games. But in a lot of circles and spaces, the poker players or the academics won't let the author sit down at the table and actually talk with them. So yeah, really, really interesting. Sorry if I butchered that analogy, but I believe something like that is in there. Great essay. Another essay, one of the ones I read more recently, especially this is important for a piece that I'm working on right now. Erikson's essay called Death and the End of Finality is all about different cultural attitudes towards death and finality, whether or not it is final. There's some characters from Book 5, Midnight Tides, that I'm working on a short essay about, and an essay such as this by Erikson himself is an invaluable resource for that essay that I'm working on. Last but not least, part 3, I just want to go through a few honorable mentions and other sources you might want to consider if you want to write something more academic about Malazan. So first and foremost, let's talk about Julian Jaynes's The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, originally published in 1976. This is like a psychology theory sort of heavy book, and I have not read this, but I have it ordered and I'm very excited to read it when I get it. Why am I excited? Well, in a few recent interviews with Erikson on other YouTube channels, he has repeatedly brought up this book and sung its praises. So I'm sure if you're interested in studying the theory that might have influenced Erikson's writing in Malazan, this would be a great read and pretty much a necessary inclusion on your bibliography. Now, while this is an older work from 76, it leads me to my next suggestion, a book called Conversations on Consciousness and the Bicameral Mind, Interviews with Leading Thinkers on Julian Jaynes's Theory. This was released in 2022. It's always a good idea to not only look at a theory, but to also see what recent scholarship is saying about that theory. In this field, 2022, seeing that publication date on something is wonderful. It shows that, oh good, this is still a conversation people are having, and it's something I could respond to or contribute to. Now, I'll also just briefly list off some of the fiction that would also be worthwhile to study up on a bit, at least if you don't have time to read it all, but the fiction that influenced Erikson and Esselmann's writing, some of it. This includes, but is not limited to, of course, the collected works of Shakespeare, produced between 1590, 1614, roughly. These are specifically a recommendation if you're interested in academic conversations around Carcanis and style, as Erikson has spoken about Shakespeare having a significant stylistic impact on the way he's writing that trilogy. Now, this isn't a video about Shakespeare, which I love and I could talk about for days, but for my money, both the first and second Henriads, in total 8 of the 10 history plays, are incredible reads, and I think if you enjoy historical fiction in the slightest, you'll have a blast with those, but you'll also then have read enough Shakespeare to get that stylistic connection to Malazan, and specifically Carcanis. I also want to talk about, I'll also shout out Conan the Barbarian here as an influence by Robert E. Howard, first appearance in Weird Tales magazine, 1932. Worthwhile, especially if you want to write about Karsa, but with sword and sorcery, maybe even more than Conan, this next series, Fafford and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Lieber. This is a darker sword and sorcery kind of series of stories about an unlikely duo. This was published in various magazines and collections between 1939 and 1988. I know this was definitely a major influence for Erikson, I believe for Esselmont as well. Next up, Elric of Melniboné and the Eternal Champion by Michael Moorcock. These stories first appeared in 1961, but the stories and related novels have been collected in a variety of formats ever since. It's a massive world, Moorcock's multiverse. Importantly for this one, I do not think this is one of Erikson's main influences, but rather one of Esselmont's. And if there's one notable gap or space that I really want to hammer home that needs to be filled by further scholarship, if I haven't made this clear enough by now, let it be known that more serious attention should be paid to Esselmont's contributions. Next up, Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen R. Donaldson, originally published 1977, 1979, that first trilogy, but the full series, 77 to 2013. These books, and Donaldson himself, massive influence on all things Malazan. And then we have The Black Company by Glenn Kuck, and most of the main series there was published between 1984 and 2000. I believe there's some stuff still in the works though. If someone more familiar with the series could correct me below, but I believe there's things that might still be forthcoming. And then I'll also briefly mention The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Erikson has spoken about that book also as a pretty big influence. So, there you have it. That's a quick rundown of some of the more academic responses to Malazan, as well as other sources you might want to consider if you want to write something more academic about the series. There really isn't all that much out there on the academic secondary sources side of things, but if you've read some Malazan and feel like maybe you need a narrative studies or a lit scholar or academic theorist to maybe help you sort through the denser themes, or maybe you're just looking for more professional takes and responses to all things Malazan, again, there's not much out there, but most of it's pretty fascinating. I should also say that this is only the beginning of essentially a rough annotated bibliography for the secondary source ongoing academic conversation around Malazan. As I mentioned in my intro, I'll eventually be incorporating these and hopefully whatever else I dig up into my final project for school, maybe even a book someday. But yeah, I think there is definitely a great and growing community of fans on YouTube, Reddit, etc. I think I really just wish there was a similar community, similar-sized community in academia. And I wanted to shed a light on some of the people, important scholars in that community, and I hope I've done that, raise some awareness about the wonderful work that these scholars have done and what they've kind of added to Malazan in their academic work. So, thank you all so much for watching. Please see the references in the description below if you're interested in any of these sources. I hope you have a great day. Bye.